about my bonding experience with my rabbits, what techniques I used, and what worked best. So I kind of had a unique experience. Most people tend to have two adult bunnies that they bond, one or both of them being rescued, whereas I was bonding a 1-year-old bunny with a 6-month-old bunny, neither of which came from a rescue. I got both my bunnies at 8 weeks old, so they were really bonded to me before they ever bonded to each other, and they also were never in a rescue, so they didn't really have that element of past torment or anything, which really made my experience quite unique. So I got Benny in July of 2017, and about a month after he was fixed, I decided I really wanted to have a second rabbit. I was going to be starting school, so I wasn't going to be home a whole lot, and I wanted him to have someone so he would have some company, and I noticed he was being a little lethargic and kind of bored. So I did try adopting 2 bunnies that didn't work out. So like I said, I brought Bailey home at 8 weeks old, and she was kept in a separate cage than Benny. They were in the same room and their cages were side by side, but they never interacted with each other. Anytime I would let the 2 of them out, it would be one at a time, and there would be a barrier around the other one's cage that they couldn't see each other. At first, I did try just keeping NIC grids around the other cage so they couldn't bat at each other, but then being able to see each other, Benny did get a little aggressive and kind of run up and down the cage trying to chase her, so I ended up just surrounding the cage with cardboard. So for example, if Bailey was out playing, Benny's cage would be covered, and if Benny was out playing, I would cover Bailey's cage. There were a few times that Benny did hop over the cardboard and was between the cardboard and Bailey's cage, and they could interact a little bit. Benny did grunt at her a little, but for the most part, they really didn't seem bothered by the other one's presence, so I thought that was a really good sign for bonding. So when Bailey got to the right age, around 5 or 6 months, I got her fixed. And then a few weeks after that, once all the hormones were out of her system, I started bonding. The first place I bonded them was in the bathtub, which I would recommend because they can't get a whole lot of traction in there, which does 2 things. One, they can't get enough traction to really lunge or chase each other. And 2, it gives them a little bit of stress, so it is a little bit of a stress bonding without actually, putting them in a car or on top of a dryer like some people would. So what I did was I held Bailey, since she is much smaller than Benny. I held her in my lap and I sat in the bathtub and I let Benny come to her. He smelled her a little bit, but really wasn't overly interested. Bailey was quite timid at first, but she did end up crawling off of my lap herself and went up to Benny a few times. They sniffed each other. Benny did grunt and lunge at her once, but that was it. After that, things went really well. There were a few times in the first session where Benny mounted Bailey and she did try to run away, but there was nothing too serious, no fights or anything like that. So the second session was again in the bathtub. This time I was not a part of it, it was just the bunnies, and there was a bit of a dominance struggle. They went back and forth with mounting each other and chasing each other, but they ended up being in there for about an hour. And towards the end, they were grooming each other, flopping, everything that you want to see in a bonding session. After that, I did do a third bonding session in the bathtub, which was just complete peace. They were sleeping next to each other, flopping over, grooming. There were some times where they even ignored each other, which is also a really good sign in bonding. That session lasted probably about an hour and a half. So after that, I wanted to move them out of a neutral territory and back into their bedroom where they both live, but was originally Benny's territory before I moved them into living together. So I set up an X-pen in the bedroom and put them in there with a litter box, water, food, toys, basically set up a mock cage for them, but was supervising the entire time right outside the cage, ready to break up any fights if there were any. But fortunately for me, there was not one fight. Initially, they completely ignored each other. They laid on opposite sides of the cage, they drank a little bit, played with some toys, and I let them just hang out in there for a couple hours while I sat next to the cage and did some homework, and they were just completely fine. After a while, they started cuddling, and then since then, they've really been inseparable. Naturally, there were a few times where Bailey tried to mount Benny, and he wasn't too crazy about it, but eventually he did give in. Bailey did end up being the dominant rabbit, which was pretty amusing because she's about half of Benny's size, but she's definitely a feisty girl. So when they were in this mock cage situation, I ended up giving them their veggies in there to see how they would react with food. They shared their food. They did not fight over it whatsoever. They ended up being in there from about 11 in the morning until probably 8 at night. I did put them back in their own separate cages that night, just because their larger cage wasn't ready and neither of their cages was really big enough for 2 rabbits. So the next day, I put them back in the X pen all day while I built their bigger cage, which you can see a video of that I did. I will put it in the card above. So since then, they've been living together, completely content, very happy. I have noticed a huge difference in Benny. He was becoming very lethargic. He slept a lot. He seemed very bored and almost depressed. Since he's been living with Bailey, he is so much more animated. He plays a lot more. He runs around. He binkies. He has been a little bit more distant with me since he moved in with Bailey. And initially that was very hard for me because when it was just me and Benny, we were very close. He would lay on me and take naps. We would cuddle every morning and every night. And since he's bonded to Bailey, he really doesn't connect with me like that anymore. I do know that the reason that he's more distant is because I've given him the best environment that I can, and that he's now happy having Bailey, his little buddy, and they're just so content together and inseparable. Benny has had a really tough first year of his life. He went through bonding 3 times with 3 different rabbits. He's had stasis 2 or 3 times. The last time was very scary and I really didn't think he would make it. So bringing him into bonding for a 3rd time, I was nervous. I was very afraid if it didn't work, it would have really bad effects on him again. So that's why I decided to get a baby rabbit and do it this way that I did, where they had a lot of extended time near each other before they bonded. I think Benny is finally truly happy and living the best life he can. This was the best way for me to go about it. I know some people would disagree and go about it a different way, but I think that I gave a lot of different techniques a good try, and this is what worked for me. I would encourage anyone that has a rabbit to get it a companion. They really do work best in bonded pairs or even groups. They like that companionship, and as much as you may bond with your rabbit, there's no comparison to 2 rabbits bonding. Benny and I were extremely bonded, but he still got sick a lot, and I could tell that he was depressed and bored, so there's really no better option than to bond 2 bunnies together and give them the perfect environment for them to thrive. I hope you all enjoyed my video about my experience and can take some tips away, and I will see you next time. Bye!